Hello, Internet! Welcome to episode 358 of the Assorted Calibers podcast.
I think you mean, Weer'd, 357 plus one in the chamber.
Erin.
Yes, Weer'd. I mean...
357 is a revolver cartridge. They're only chambers.
Au contraire, Weer'd. There's 357 SIG.
You're right, Erin.
I am technically correct. The best kind of correct. But yes,
the Second Amendment podcast has a little bit for everyone. I'm Weird Beard, and you have heard the very impish voice of the greatest hostess. I mean, she really... I don't like it. I don't like that you're this great, Erin Paulette, but you are. Erin Paulette, how are you doing, Erin?
I'm just saying, all this could be avoided if we had stuck to the original schedule and had episode 357 as the Elmer Keith episode. But no, you had to go do a roundtable about goals, and now everything's off. And then I, come up with a title that offends the purists.
David was going after the exact same thing when I was talking about doing the show prep this morning, and I told him, I said, look, it was either have the goals round table be a week delayed, or have it be one number off for the Elmer Keith episode. And as I mentioned, I talked to Elmer; he's fine with it.
Really?
Well, I asked him and he didn't say anything, so I assumed he wasn't bothered.
I mean, Weird, I know full well that you're agnostic. So either you're lying to me or you communed with the spirits, which I also think you don't believe in, using a Ouija board.
Erin, you also know that I'm a man I've spent a lot of time out to sea, and so therefore I am very well aware that dead men tell no tales.
Okay, well, I'm not a dead man, and I tell tales. So,
all right. Tell some tales.
This is not going to be a compelling story. I'm going to try to not make it very long. But how am I doing? Okay, Weird. Do you want the good news first, or do you want the bad news first?
I generally like the bad news first. That way, the good news leaves us on a good note.
Okay, so I think I mentioned this last week before the podcast started. I've been having issues with my phone, and so, Friday the 15th, I woke up and I checked my phone, and my phone was showing really what I can only describe as the Android version of the blue screen of death. In this case, it wasn't blue, it was black and had, ASCII green writing on it. And I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was some version of your Android operating system has crashed, and you shouldn't be seeing this. So go ahead and restart, but if you keep seeing this screen, something has gone fatally wrong, and you will probably need to do a factory reset. And I went, okay, duly noted. And I restarted my phone, and it was on for like maybe 30 seconds before it crashed. And it kept doing that, and I go, okay, something is wrong. I don't know what's wrong, because I didn't download an app recently, let alone anything questionable. Maybe there was an update that didn't sit well. I don't know. But
sunspots. It's
okay.
Always sunspots.
But, I've got it backed up to the cloud, and, I've got one from like the day before. Okay, no problem. So I do a factory reset, and I start setting up again. And I sign in, which is its own little side quest, which I won't get into, but it's that whole Google wants me to sign into my account and it wants to send me a text. How is it going to send me a text on my phone, which hasn't gotten set up yet? I don't understand why they can't send me an email, for crying out loud. But anyway, I finally got that resolved. I don't remember how, but there was lots of screaming and cursing and alcohol. And then I go to the, backup from the cloud, and my phone does not see my phone backup. Now, I know it's connected because it sees my tablet backup, no problem, but it's not seeing the phone backup. Why is this? Well, I don't know. And I go back and forth trying to get help, and it's not working. Eventually, I just succumb to the temptation, and I buy a Google One subscription because it's like $1 a month for 6 months. And okay, that's worth actually talking to a human in order to get help. And I have to go through about 3 of them because the first one is an absolute drone that's reading off a script, and it got to the point where I just pulled up ChatGPT, and it was like, okay, we're going to go AI versus script just to try and break out of this. And eventually I just quit. The second one was a lot more helpful, and we have to go through all the steps and all the screenshots just to prove that my problem is actually what it is. And he gives me hope, and he says that what I need to do is turn my tablet on and keep it on, and it will download a version of my phone's backup, and then I can restore from the tablet rather than from the cloud. Now, I don't fully understand how this works, and I would be a little skeptical, but this is a professional who's telling me this, and I am not fully versed in IT, so I buy it. And I ask how long will this take, and he says, between 24 and 48 hours. Okay. Now by this time, literally a week has passed, and so now we are at this weekend, and it's been time, and my tablet still hasn't downloaded all of the backup. It says backup incomplete. And I thought that was bad. He says it's just because the tablet hadn't finished downloading it. And so 48 hours later, I talked to another human being, and I've literally got the case number, and it's just like, here's the case number, read this. Read the freaking notes and get up to speed so that you can help me. And I get someone who helps me, and we do the dance of screenshots again. And finally, it comes down to the bad news, the news that I suspected all along, that the backup was corrupted. Oh. And according to them, what happened was, while my phone was backing up, it crashed. And so, because the backup is incomplete, it won't work, and that's why my phone wasn't seeing it, because there's like a safety measure. It won't download things that it can't use. Why I could see my tablet, I don't know. I guess because they're both Android. And so, okay, I have to start from scratch again. But really the most annoying thing was that for like 48 hours when I could have been rebuilding my phone, I was living on this false hope, and that really annoyed me. So yeah, that was the bad news, and it literally consumed like 10 days of my life.
Ugh, all right. This is why I ask it the way I want. I desperately need some good news now.
All right, so the good news. I have a phone that still works, and I'm slowly rebuilding it. I think I'm about 80% there. I've got the stuff that I use the most, although there's always the edge cases, like the app that I would download for that one thing and then forget about. The thing that really annoys me is that some of my apps have been removed from the App Store, like Legal Heat, an app that contained all of the firearm laws separated for every single state. And it was removed because Google doesn't like guns. And So there's that. But my phone still works. It's mostly doing what I want now, and I somehow managed to keep a healthy perspective on all of this, and I managed to avoid melting down or going into a depression spiral. So that's a restrained yay from me.
I mean, that's impressive, Erin. So yeah, well, there's you.
I'm not quite sure what you think is impressive.
That you didn't go down that rabbit hole, because again, I feel for you. It's one thing having a task be overly long and arduous. It's a completely other thing to have the overly long and arduous task be futile.
There's more than a few times I was seriously tempted to get a hammer. Because it's the monkey part of the brain. This is thwarting me. It must die. But I managed to restrain that.
Yeah, we had to get a new dish. Well, we didn't have to get a new dishwasher. Our dishwasher, both our dishwasher and our clothes washer both died during the COVID lockdowns. And so in the middle of all the shortages and all the shenanigans and all of that, and with the clothes washer, at least it was turning on and just not working right. So I had a rough idea of what was wrong with it. So we ended up buying a part, and that part happened to fix it. But with the case of the dishwasher, it was giving us no feedback whatsoever. It just wasn't working. It wasn't turning on, and it wasn't cleaning dishes. And so I just was like, this thing's like 12 years old at this point in time. Like, we could hire a service tech, have them come in, have them diagnose the problem, have them fix it, and then have it up and running. And that would be all less than the cost of buying a new dishwasher. But also, it's old, so it could just turn around and die in the next month because it's an old dishwasher. So we just bought a new one. And it took us, because of the pandemic and some shenanigans that I'm not going to get into, it took us like 6 months to get it. And so at one point my wife was saying, doing a really good job at keeping up with all the dishes. And I said, I don't want to talk. Yes, I am. I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I recall you telling that story at least once before.
Yeah. No, it was the key point was, I told my wife, I said, have a go to hell chambered and ready whenever you're talking to them, because if they try to say, oh, we could get you another dishwasher in from this or that or all that, we will be doing this forever. So just tell them, give us our money back, and then we'll go to another vendor. And that was what we ended up doing.
Yeah.
So speaking of problematic hardware, I thought maybe we could go one show without a SIG P320 update, but man, there is another one, and this again, the plot thickens. Like, there's twists and turns. So the big story that, of course, we've been talking about is the airman in Wyoming who was shot and killed by a SIG M18 pistol, allegedly still in the holster. We wondered if this was one of the malfunctions that the gun has allegedly been having, and this is what went on. But then last week we noted that an airman was arrested for giving a false report and potentially facing, was it murder charges or manslaughter?
Manslaughter.
Yeah, manslaughter charges. And so it's one of those, like, okay, the plot thickens, and now along that same line, the Air Force has essentially stayed their hold on using the M18 and M17 pistols, which was their reaction to the airman losing his life.
Yeah, there's really not a whole lot to this. It's a fairly long article that doesn't really say a whole lot. But yeah, they've investigated, and they found some wear problems, and so there are some pistols that are flagged for repair or replacement, and so that's good. But they couldn't find anything involving uncommanded discharges, and so the preponderance of caution, which they used to suspend the use of the M17 and the M18, is now no longer warranted, and so they're going back to using them. And I don't feel bad about this. I don't feel good about this. All I want is for people not to get hurt by, or other people to be hurt by their own weapons. And so, if the military versions of the SIG P320 are not discharging without a trigger pull, then okay.
Yeah, I'd also just like to just get down to the bottom of it, to figure out is the 320 as bad a gun as the naysayers are saying, or is there nothing wrong and this was all just everything blown out of proportion, or is there something that is wrong? It's super rare. But if the wrong part combination or wrong part wear is going through, and therefore SIG owners can check their own guns, and SIG themselves can fix things so that hopefully the guns out there can be turned into a condition that is as safe as any other of the guns that are out there. But yeah, I don't like this, like, the back and forth that's going on one hand. So people have discovered some very, very troubling situations where they can get the gun to go off without touching the trigger. And then SIG comes back and says, oh no, under no circumstances can the gun be go off with touching the trigger. Well, are they telling the truth or are they lying? And then, this airman got killed. But this other airman now got arrested in relation to his death. And now the SIGs are back on the line after testing. I don't know who to root for, so we'll just keep neutrally reporting.
Well, in this case, I think we should be on the side of truth, whatever that ends up being.
Yep, no, that's the good side to be in.
Yeah, I will say that SIG has made this harder on themselves through their own actions.
Absolutely.
And so, to me, the big problem, even if there were a mechanical fault, the real problem is no longer mechanical. The real problem is reputational and institutional to Sig Sauer. And they need to change their company culture, and they need to change their public perception, or this is going to haunt them for a long, long time.
That is absolutely true. And I mean, even then, it's still going to take a long time for them to get out from underneath it. I mean, they were... Mm-hmm. I haven't heard about it nearly as much recently, but when I first got into shooting... there were still people that would never buy a Smith & Wesson firearm because they colluded with the Clintons during the assault weapons ban. And, and it's just one of those, like, it's not even the same company anymore. It's the same company, but the people who owned it, they got thrown out. The people who did that got thrown out. They're gone. Like, the whole company went into bankruptcy and got sold. So yeah, that's, so that very well, this SIG may not be able to do anything to get out from under this. All right, on to some court news, and this is some pretty good news. Is that the Federal Appeals Court blocks New Mexico's gun sales waiting period, and so this was a Ortega versus Lujan Gresham, who is the governor of New Mexico, and New Mexico is one of the several states that have added waiting periods to their firearms purchases. Two other states that are near and dear to my heart, so the states of Vermont and Maine, and they have added them really just to be jerks.
So this is in addition to the federally mandated 3-day waiting period.
Correct. Yep. You pass the background check and the gun is yours. You just have to come back. Literally nothing happens, but people just sit around twiddling their thumbs. Like, there's not even going to be an FBI agent that's going to storm into the gun shop and say, wait, this person's a serial killer. Because there's literally nothing. As far as the federal government goes, they've done all they need to do, and it's not like the state police of that state are doing anything at all they're probably not even party to it at all. So yeah, no, this is literally just all right, now go sit in the corner. And of course, I mean, they're super dumb because it's one of those like, okay, it's one like my nephew just recently discovered. I hadn't heard that Vermont had passed a waiting period, but yeah, he had just bought a new gun, and they said, cool. He did all the 4473, passed the background check. This, all right, you got to come back next week. He goes, what? Oh, we got a waiting period now. Okay. And my nephew is very much on the same track as me. As we went to the range. We went to the range when I was up in Vermont, and like he showed up with like multiple guns that I didn't even know he had yet. Like, just okay. Well, there you got those, and so he's got like dozens of guns, and yet they're gonna say waiting period. Why? Cooling off for what? Like, it's not like that gun's going to make a difference when you've got, 5 to 10 more at home. So thankfully, I also note that the courts also ruled that that the historical test doesn't hold up, and notes that there were no waiting periods, obviously, in the time of the the ratification of the Second Amendment, and really the only time waiting periods first appeared was with the passage of the Brady Act in the early 90s, and that was just simply because you needed to wait for that letter to that 4473 to literally go to West Virginia, get looked at by an FBI agent, and then I can't remember if it was going to West Virginia or it was going to Quantico, but either way, it was going somewhere here in the Northeast, and then well, it's more center, but whatever. It's going somewhere in the United States, and then it has to physically come back with the proceed, hold, or deny, and that's the whole purpose of the waiting period. It was just literally time for the postman to pick it up and for it to make its way across the country and then come back. And then when the instant background check system came through, they said, we don't need to do this anymore. You just pick up the phone, or later turn on the computer. And but the certain anti-gun states were like, well, we can't get rid of that because gun owners like it and we have to be mean to them.
See, here's the thing. The Brady Law was passed in like 93, but as early as 1991, I had access to email, and fax machines existed. So even then, the reliance on the mail was outdated.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, that's a good point. Was actually I had to fax in my timesheets when I worked as a fisheries observer, and literally I just asked my boss. I'm like, can I submit an expense report for a fax modem? And literally installed a modem in a computer that had never had a dial-up modem, just so I could use a flatbed scanner and my phone lines to fax in some paperwork. And yeah, so it was one of those, like, even if you didn't have a fax machine in the 90s, you could totally still fax just using your modems.
Mm-hmm. I think the technical term of that was IP telephony. I'm not entirely sure.
I mean, it was because it was straight up. You would see back in the olden days, you would see, 56K fax modem, and literally it was just because it had fax software on the card. So it was straight up doing the fax machine thing. Kids, ask your folks, because fax machines have gone by the wayside. Unless you work in a hospital, and actually, even I think hospitals are starting to phase them out. But yeah, fax machines used to be all the rage. So yeah, this is good news, and it's especially good news for all the other states that have this really just punitive law. And hopefully this will, granted, I suspect Governor Gresham has been pretty nasty to gun owners and digging her heels in. So the fact that this may get appealed again certainly isn't out of the realm of possibility.
Well, all we can do is hope that NYSERPA v. Bruin continues to bear fruit.
Mm-hmm.
And if it doesn't in this case, we've just got to sue and try again. And I guess just hope that the principles of the Constitution win out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. I sound kind of down, and well, I am, because I've had a week. But there's also the fact I'm looking at this next topic, and I'm absolutely dreading it. And it's from friend of the show Cam Edwards at Bearing Arms, and he's talking. This is titled "Gun Control Group Now Offering Firearms Instruction," and he put it in scare quotes. Good for him. And so what's going on is that Everytown for Gun Safety is now trying to offer its own firearms safety course. And it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It left a bad taste in Cam's mouth. I think everyone who reads it, who is a gun owner, is going to feel this way, because we're all wondering what the ulterior motive is. Because why would a gun control group be teaching safety? And it's not the simple humanitarian answer of, we want people to be safe. And so there is a belief put forward, I believe, by Cam, because this was pitched to people at the National Conference of State Legislatures. And it feels like Everytown is trying to force its way into the gun culture, into gun stores, into ranges. They've already got certifications in place. And the suspicion is that they want state-level lawmakers to mandate attendance to an Everytown gun safety course before you can buy a gun or get a license or things like that. And this course is 8 hours long, and it's probably not going to include any range time, because it's probably going to be a lot of propaganda. And so you'll have to take 8 hours out of your day, or perhaps, 2 to 4 hours over multiple days. There's no mention in here about how much it's going to cost, but it's not going to be cheap, and they're going to force people to sit through it. And then, of course, there's the question of instructors, because what self-respecting firearm instructor is going to partner with an organization that's made it quite plain that they want to put instructors out of business?
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels to me like this is a combination naked cash grab and yet another insinuation, a parasitic insinuation into gun culture, so that they can wear it like a skin.
I would also say that that anti-gunners are also huge fans of the Catch-22. You get you can't have that scoped rifle because it's far too accurate. It's a sniper rifle. But also this short-barreled rifle is far too dangerous because it's not accurate, or the semi-auto rifle is not as accurate, and so therefore is far more dangerous. It's
a street sweeper. It's a room broom.
Mm-hmm. And then so another one that I've realized is California had lead ammo bans. I haven't seen them actually initiate this, but I've predicted it. Is California and several other states have put in lead ammo bans for fear that shooting lead bullets in certain areas will get into the environment and will hurt the various animals out there with lead poisoning, which really
this isn't new.
Yeah.
This is not new. I mean, I remember something about...
Oh, it's old,
yeah, like I don't know, the 70s or the 80s when the California condor was, as I understand it, the condor is a scavenger, and when hunters would shoot prey animals and they wouldn't, pack out the entire carcass, or in the rare case that the game animal got away, then the condor would eat it and would eat the lead pellets and would die of lead poisoning. And because the condor was endangered, this became an issue of environmental and species preservation. And so they outlawed that sort of thing. And the solution at the time was to make shot then out of steel, which was not poisonous, but that degraded the shotgun barrel. Did I miss anything important there?
No, you didn't. But that was the key factor is, and actually switching over to, you're 100% right on shotguns. And also steel shot is far less effective than lead shot just because steel is so much lighter. But the, also for like, if you were hunting with a rifle, you're not going to be able to use lead core bullets. So instead you'd switch to like copper monoliths and that sort of stuff. But that's where you get the catch-22 is when you look at the various laws against quote unquote armor piercing ammo, one of the most common ways that they define armor piercing ammo is ammo that does not use a soft lead core. So specifically saying...
Yeah, I remember talking about this during the Gunblog Variety Cast era. They were talking about the green tips. And that was classified as armor piercing, even though it wasn't actually a military designation of armor piercing, and it was done primarily to get rid of the poisonous lead.
Yep. So they like catch-22s, and getting back to the Train Smart course is it can also be, again, every state has trainers. If you live in any state in the union, you can go get yourself some training. You can get yourself some advanced training. You can get yourself some basic training. It's all right there. And you could also go to operationblazingsword.com and find yourself someone that'll take you to the range and give you a brief introductory that is not official training, but is super friendly and super fun.
Yes, it's not training, because that's a protected term. It's education.
Yep. But only in serious gun prohibitionist states is there mandatory training. I guess that's not true, because a bunch of states still have like some basic firearms training required to get a carry permit. But I think about here in Massachusetts, I had to take an NRA basic pistol class just to get my first license. And actually I've been telling people around here that don't own guns, but had a little bit of interest, is they haven't unveiled it yet. Supposedly it was supposed to happen by now, but it still hasn't. But supposedly some insanely onerous training protocol was going to be unveiled by Mara Healy and company for what was the new required training to get your carry permit in Massachusetts. It's still the same NRA basic pistol and or equivalent. But in theory, this course could be the only course needed to get your permit. And of course, in Massachusetts, the permit's to own, not to carry. And so, or not just to carry. So to actually buy your first gun, you would need to go to an Everytown trainer, and God knows what propaganda they would put into this. But then on top of that, if Everytown is controlling who, is controlling who can train, they can also shut off the tap and just be like, oh yeah, we don't have any training courses, or, hey, our training courses are in, a gun range in Manhattan. So you actually have to travel to New York City, possibly secure lodging in one of the more expensive cities to spend the night in and take the training course. Like they could easily do what Chicago did to ban concealed carry, which was, they didn't actually ban concealed carry. They just said you need a special permit to it, and no one would issue the permit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I suspect blatant cash grab, maybe, but I think the bigger overall for it is a way to make it so that you can now it's going to make it a catch-22, that you need this special training to own or carry a firearm, and we're going to make this special training really hard to get a hold of. But let's go on to some better news, Erin, and you shared this story with me.
Mm-hmm. So this is a really long article, and it pretty rapidly devolves into Australian politics. So it's going to be brief because I'm going to hit the highlights that appeal to Americans. And so the title of this is from the Australia, perhaps not the Australian version of The Guardian, but they've got a tab for Australia. And it says, Australia's gun lobby says it's winning, and that is in quotes, the fight against firearm control as numbers surge. And so, according to this article, there are now more than 4 million guns in Australia, and that's almost double the number that was recorded during the height of gun ownership, and then the subsequent Port Arthur massacre that led to the crackdown. And so it's got the usual pearl clutching about how Australia was once the gold standard for gun safety, but now it's losing control. And so it is really neat to see that the Australian people are standing up. Actually, this isn't so much standing up to the government, because they're not even protesting. They're doing this legally. They're just buying a lot of guns, and they're growing the culture. And so, good for them. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, okay, I'll get to that in a moment, but here's some good numbers. So there's been more than a 10% increase in gun ownership in the Australian states of Victoria and New South Wales, 30% rise in Queensland, and 45% rise in the Northern Territory. There are 2,000 new guns lawfully entering the country every week. And here's the best part. New South Wales Firearm Registry data shows that in Sydney, which I'm pretty sure is the capital of Australia, don't quote me on that.
I believe it's also
they're more
city.
Okay. See, I thought it was, and I started overthinking it. But anyway, in Sydney, there are more than 70 people who own more than 100 firearms, including one person who owns 385 guns. Quote, "The register notes that this is not a collector or a dealer," unquote. Someone really likes guns. Good for him or her. And so this actually jives with something that I have seen with pink pistols. And it seems like the firearms community seems to thrive under pressure. And while I don't really know about Australian culture, here in America, when the government says we can't do something, there's a large portion of us that says, screw you, now we want to do it. So pink pistols chapters in gun-friendly states, like here in Florida, they don't get together as often. They aren't as active as pink pistols chapters in places like California, where there is this active attempt to crush the culture and make gun ownership difficult. And that's at least partially because, well, everything in the state is trying to keep us from doing that, so we're going to pull together. And you just don't have that in gun-friendly states, or it's a lot easier to get the gun, and it's a lot easier to go shooting with friends. And so I do wonder if Australia has that same level of, because we are oppressed isn't the right word, but because the government is making it difficult, we're now going to support each other and make it easier for all of us to become gun owners and train and enjoy our hobby. And I realize I'm beginning to ramble a bit. So in short, good on ya, Australia. Show them what for.
Yeah. And I will also note that the article does not show any crime or violent crime numbers in there, but Dr. John Lott has done some pretty extensive studying of this and shown that I would say probably the crime numbers are entirely independent from the number of gun owners, number of legal gun owners in Australia. So just like everything with gun control, at best, gun control does nothing. At worst, it actually lowers public safety.
And why is that weird? Gosh, is it because that the people who obey the law are the people who wouldn't commit a crime in the first place, and so the potential victims are disarmed, but the people who would commit crimes don't listen to the law to begin with?
Funny how that works.
And so another law is not going to stop them at all? Huh. That's odd.
Erin, with your crazy conspiracy theories.
Yep.
All right. Now comes the point where point in the show when we point and laugh. This was a fun one. And it's even more fun. I think I shared this with you when it first came out and I first found it, and you were as impressed as I was on this is coming from The Trace, aka Bloomberg's little news portal that he totally created but totally doesn't control. They rally, and it's the Rally the Nation after the Parkland school shootings. Years later, their group is floundering, and this is essentially it's another long one article on the troubles of March for Our Lives, which itself is an Everytown subsidiary, and so therefore wholly owned by Michael Bloomberg. This is a weird one. Essentially, the short answer is that it doesn't give any motivation behind it. I kind of wonder if Michael Bloomberg is feeling that March for Our Lives isn't generating the same rate of return that Moms Demand Action is, and is shuttering it. But essentially, the long and the short is that they've never turned a profit. They've always spent more money than they were able to raise in fundraising, and they have had a handful of employees. Like, it's the line right here. On March 20th of this year, just before the 7-year anniversary of its celebrated rallies, March for Our Lives let go 13 of its 16 full-time employees. So that's saying that, number one, this was just a skeleton crew, and likely the not full-time employees may have been interns and volunteers. But yeah, most of them are gone. That's all but 3. And there's a couple of other instances where they've mentioned layoffs that is like 90 to 99% of the staff was given pink slips. And the one other line that, let me see if I can find it right here, that got me chuckling is, there was a whole discussion on the fact that evidently there was a big internal struggle within this of what position do we take on the Israel-Gaza war, and not wanting to, and the discussion being, well, let's not take a position because it has nothing to do with gun control, and some people are siding with Israel and some people are siding with Gaza, and we don't want to upset anybody or make us feel like we're against anybody, and we need to raise money. But then there were people that were saying, oh, we absolutely have to stand up for one side or the other. And I think we know which side, but but I digress. And but the other one is there's a whole generation that does not feel connected to this movement. Another concern was maintaining the authenticity as a youth crusade when so much direct support came from an older demographic, particularly white women. At one point, 80% of our following was middle-aged white women, and we focused our message on them, and it was effective. So, essentially saying that like middle-aged white women were the bread and butter of this youth-targeted group. Essentially, the same people that were March for Our Lives. And also, I will state, as someone who's been to many Everytown and Moms Demand Action rallies, that middle-aged might not be the best demographic, because I don't think a lot of people live to be 120 or older.
Okay. One of the things that I found very interesting in this article is that it says that March for Our Lives criticized Everytown for gun safety for being obnoxious about creating space and undermining March for Our Lives. And that's just not smart. It's definitely not smart if, as was suspected, Bloomberg was funding it. But even if he's not funding it, you are making enemies with a very rich and powerful person. Don't do that, you idiots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're going through, and then as a follow up, we have Tom Knighton from Bearing Arms in gun control crowd. Racism is still the favorite scapegoat, and I mean, I'm just gonna leave it and just make it short and sweet. Here is essentially who said this. They don't give it. They just say some people that were message saying that some of the fundraising problems may have happened within within March for Our Lives because of racism, and specifically in the fact that and I think actually this is pretty true, is that all of the gun prohibitionist groups tend to focus on spree killers, which is like less than 1% of the deaths from guns in any given year. But they do it because they don't get nearly as much interest in the highest rate of gun deaths, which is inner city street violence. And there's also suicides, which of course their laws do absolutely nothing to help in any way, shape, or form. So they can't actually talk about that because that's way too much low hanging fruit for us pro Second Amendment people. But they don't want to talk about inner city violence because the majority of their support are middle-aged white people. And middle-aged white people are more concerned about events that may actually affect them or their children.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't there a related article? Yeah, the very next one, where they're talking about how racism is the favorite scapegoat for why these things are floundering.
Yep. And
the short version that I got from this is that if you talk about white people getting killed, it's easier to get funding than if you talk about black people getting killed. And I'm not going to touch on that discussion at all. I'm simply saying that's the argument that is being made. And so the racism argument is that if you want gun control to succeed, you have to talk about white people dying. And if you talk about minorities dying, it at best doesn't help, and at worst actively hurts. So that's a thing they say.
And I will also say that historically, when you go back, you will find that that most gun control is race-based and is racist in nature. I mean, people. I know that for a little while there was an anti-gun talking point. I might have covered it in a Weird Audio Fisk, where people pointed out the fact that, Hitler supported gun control, and people pointed out, no, actually the Weimar Republic was far more restrictive in gun ownership than Hitler was. That is true. Adolf Hitler did roll back a ton of gun ownership laws, in Nazi Germany that had been created by the Weimar Republic. But he also rolled in a ton of gun control laws against Jews and gypsies. So if you were the type of people that the Nazis weren't treating well, you were completely unarmed. And of course, we've got all of the Jim Crow South gun control laws, including, the modern day pistol purchase permits were specifically designed to price out, poor blacks and sharecroppers out of owning firearms. And of course, I'll also note that a lot of the modern push for gun control that is happening has been based or hasn't really got it jump started with the Civil Rights Act. That was when suddenly you couldn't tell certain people because of the color of their skin or their economic position that they couldn't exercise their Second Amendment rights. And so now we started getting these like, oh, you need to have a training course and you need to have this permit and you need to have waiting periods. All right, shifting gears to our first segment of the show. We have spoken often of the benefits of concealed carry legal protection, often called concealed carry insurance, though technically not always what it really is. And I've been a member of the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network for years. But with the retirement of Marty and Gila Hayes, I am now a member of CCW SAFE, and I invited Kent Brown to talk about this service. I am happy to welcome to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Kent Brown. Kent Brown is the president of CCW SAFE, and you may have heard about them before on ACP because Marty Hayes of the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network is retiring, and he has named Kent and CCW SAFE as the successor to the ACLDN. So I reached out to Marty and Kent, and I am pleased to welcome Kent to the show. How you doing, Kent?
I'm doing really well. I'm very glad to be here and talking about this and reaching your audience to tell them everything that's going on.
Yeah. So again, the big thing I want to go is when we heard the news from Marty on the show, we reported on it, and we mentioned, you know what, I actually haven't heard of CCW SAFE, and so I think I'm sure I'm not the only one. So why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about the company?
Sure. CCW SAFE, we are a self-defense legal services membership organization. We've been around for 14 years now, actually. We started in 2011. Our founders were primarily retired Oklahoma City police officers. And the genesis for starting this business and our really beginning point of view in this industry was that they had been through some things as police officers, in particular, one of them, a very serious on-duty incident that involved, a lot of shooting and some bad guys who died and some lawsuits that ensued. And he was very, very well taken care of by the Fraternal Order of Police, which, as they do for on-duty shootings. When he retired, he said to basically, well, who's going to take care of me now that the Fraternal Order of Police doesn't do that? And they started looking around at what was available at the time, and they just found those alternatives sorely lacking compared to the level of service and care, personal care, that they got from the Fraternal Order of Police. So they basically brought that model forward and said this should be available to anyone who has to defend themselves, whether it's legal fees, counseling services, access to experts, all these other things that we do. And that's how the business got started in 2011. And it's been very significant growth over the years. I came in about 4 years ago and have helped, continue that growth, putting all the systems in place. So it's, we really consider ourselves very different than the other providers in the industry, even somewhat different than Marty and Gila at ACLDN.
So how do you guys differ?
Yeah, we really focus on three things when we talk about it. And primarily the first thing is what we would just call comprehensive coverage. And if you look back at the history of the industry, which is very difficult to do, a lot of us, what people would call innovation in the industry, came from the things we did here at CCW SAFE. For example, unlimited funds for your criminal or civil defense. So all your attorney's fees, those are not capped, expert witnesses, all the things that you're going to need to be successful in a trial, should it end up that way, or even avoiding a trial. That came from us. When the industry started, people had caps. So it was 100,000. It was this and that. And so we brought in, really the era of unlimited. And most of the people do that now. Not all of them, but most of them. And then we have all this whole other complete suite of things that goes along with that. Of course, that's the primary one that people are focused on. But we started in the trend of having counseling services available to our members who'd been through an incident, and that flowed through to the rest of the industry. We have a provision to help people replace their carry weapon if it gets confiscated as part of an investigation. They're very difficult to get back. We do that. We have a provision to help clean up the scene of the incident. If something happens inside your home and you shoot someone, that's not a Mary Maid's situation. You need a very specific type of person to clean that up, and it's expensive, and so we pay for that. So there's this whole list of things that we do, and not everybody does all of those. The second thing we really focus on is just deep expertise, and so our staff is comprised of folks who have a tremendous amount of experience. I mean, literally, we're talking 100 plus years of law enforcement experience, 100 plus years of legal experience on staff. And so we know what people have been through because some of our folks have been through it. We have retired homicide investigators that are on our staff that have investigated hundreds and hundreds of homicides, many of which were self-defense situations. Don West, who's our primary national trial counsel, the person you're going to talk to on our hotline if you call in the middle of the night or the middle of the day. He has 39 years of criminal defense experience. Many people know him, as one of the co-counsel on the George Zimmerman case in Florida 10 years ago. He's a full-time employee of ours. And so no one really brings to bear all the expertise that we do in full-time staff. These are not contractors that we just call on if we need somebody. These are our full-time employees dedicated to taking care of our members. And then last, and certainly not least, is really what we would refer to as personal care. Like, we really have a program that's built to care for the individual after the incident. This is not an insurance transaction like, hey, I got an offender bender, and your insurance agent says, well, here's 10 body shops, pick one and we'll pay the bill. And there is a little bit of that in our industry. People are treated like an insurance transaction with some of the very largest people in our industry, and we're not like that. We have 7 people that get notified when you call our hotline. Even if it turns out to be something minor, we put a bunch of people on standby ready to take care of it. We're the only company in the industry that does a boots on the ground response for very serious incidents. So if you shot someone, God forbid you get shot, if it's a lethal shooting, etc., we actually send one of these retired homicide investigators to be with you and help you and your family in person within 24 hours of the call. So it's a very, very different model than what everybody else does. It's just not a transactional thing. It's a personal thing for us.
I mean, that is absolutely awesome. And I will say that I'm trying to remember if I mentioned at the top of the interview or not, but I have been a member for a number of years of ACLDN, and so therefore now I'm a member of CCW Safe. One of the things that actually I'd heard competitors of ACLDN had was such as the hazmat cleaning, the providing of replacement firearms in the event of a confiscation, and all of that was not available. So I was pleased to have that there. And I would also like just to do a quick shout out for anybody who doesn't have any one of these policies. Obviously, I've got my own recommendation, but if one thing is what you don't want to be is, even if you have the money to afford an attorney, which most don't, at least at the level that we're talking about, especially say, George Zimmerman or Kyle Rittenhouse, the amount of money that went into those trials was astronomical. But if you just essentially look up your local lawyer that specializes in firearms law, that person, maybe I'm wrong in that, but my understanding is most of the people that just have their shingle out on firearms law, they're dealing with, say, gang members and robbers and people like that, and trying to give them the best legal defense of which they deserve in that. But they're not necessarily, they're probably looking more at plea bargains than acquittals.
That certainly can be the case. That you really bring up two things we should highlight. First of all, we have people like Don. I have another attorney, Jennifer Chance, here in Oklahoma City, who was a prosecutor for many, many, many years. They're locating and vetting the best attorney in your location for you, for your specific circumstances. So, particularly if you get into a lethal self-defense shooting that may end up going to trial, we have a very specific criteria for that. So we're not going to select the attorney who's doing, carjackings and shoplifting. It's like, that's not the right person. So, it does make a difference who you have and having the correct experience for what you're dealing with. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have, incidents that result in brandishing charges or assault or things like that. That's a different attorney too. The same person that has trial experience in a murder one case that's going to use self-defense, that person's probably not going to take your lower level stuff. And so we could have two incidents in the same city, whatever, St. Louis, in the same day, and we'll probably end up with two different attorneys. So it makes a big difference. And then from a financial perspective, again, kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, we were actually the first in the industry to have a member go to trial with a possible murder one outcome 8 years ago now. And in that case, we spent a little bit over $400,000 on his behalf. So it's not Kyle Rittenhouse level stuff where you have all the same PR, but $400,000 is a ton of money for the average person out there. Even if you have assets, it's probably not sitting in cash. And so it can be a lot. And then back to the other end of the spectrum where, you might have a brandishing, you might have something that just involves going in and doing an interview with the police where we'll get you an attorney and get you prepped for the interview, and the attorney's going to go in with you. You can get over $1,000, $2,000 really quick and never have had any charges filed. So the benefit of a membership that can cost you as little as a couple $100 a year, one small incident, you've paid back 10 years or a lifetime of what you're paying in for dues, certainly.
Not to mention the peace of mind. So I've got so one other question that I have for an incident, does it necessarily need to be firearms related?
No, as long as it's self-defense related.
Yep. Because
there's many instances where you just may not have your firearm. You may become separated from your firearm. So, we've had incidents, everything from, fists all the way to, whatever other instruments that were available. So we really kind of refer to it in the category of a weapon of opportunity. And that's what happens sometimes. So it does not matter to us whether it's firearm or not.
I'll take a brief moment to point out I haven't seen as many of them recently, but you'd see all these high-speed, low-drag trainers teaching you how to deploy a firearm inside of an automobile, forgetting the fact that an automobile is both a good way to escape a bad situation and an excellent weapon.
Absolutely. And, one of the other things that we do here at CCW Safe, and some of the other folks do this too, is we provide a lot of training and education materials to help members understand that there are ways you can de-escalate, you can withdraw. There's things that you can do. Now, that said, there are plenty of instances where none of that is an option. So we're not suggesting that works every time. But there's certainly a lot of things that we see in what our members go through where some training and education would be helpful. And we have plenty of success stories where members have called in and said, yeah, this was happening. And I seen the video last month or read that article. It helped make a difference in how I handled that. So I think training and education with the firearm obviously is highly important. And most of the folks listening to this call or who are members of our company or another are doing a lot of that, but they're not dedicating a similar amount of effort or even a fractional amount of the effort to understand and train and educate how to get out of there and not use the firearm. Or even if they do use it, what do they do after that? How do they talk to the police? How do they handle the things immediately following the shooting. And so there's a lot of other opportunities for folks to learn and be better prepared for everything that surrounds the self-defense incident itself. And that's part of what we offer too.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to close out with just, we'll keep it brief because it'll start small, but it'll get real big fast. And we don't need to get into those details, but I really just kind of want to give all right, hypothetically, I am attacked and I pull my firearm and let's just say I discharge a round. Nobody's killed. Maybe nobody's hurt. But the police show up and I live in Massachusetts, so they don't take kindly to that. I end up in handcuffs. I end up sitting in a cell. And now I'm at a point where I'm allowed to get access to a telephone. Should the first number be that, the little number that's on my, that's on my keychain? By the way, they send out keychain fobs. That's the greatest idea. I love that so much. Should that be the first number I call?
It should be, if you haven't made contact with us yet, or you don't have someone else making contact with us as a proxy, whether it's a spouse or a friend. We get calls, from spouses, friends, girlfriends all the time. So if we haven't been contacted yet, yes, please call us. And then, but bear in mind, that call gets pretty limited because those are reported on from the jail. So it'll be a limited discussion of the incident, but it'll be enough to fire us off and get us going on attorneys, other resources, other people we could contact on your behalf, like a spouse or a brother or whomever else we might need to. So we do a lot of things in that call, but we don't get into, particularly from a jailhouse call.
Yep.
Tell me what happened. What did he do? When did you do next? That's not going on. You're just going to say I was attacked and I defended myself. Good. Here's what we got to do.
Perfect. Yeah. And beyond that, is a game of speculation. And I think you've detailed that. I think we got a pretty good idea of the various things that happen next. So, I mean, I can't speak highly enough. I've got the family membership plan, so my entire family is are members. I've recommended all of my family members, especially the ones that carry, but honestly speaking, it may be more than that, that they should reach out, because it is quite affordable, especially when you realize how serious it could be in the event that you are lawfully defending yourself, but law enforcement doesn't necessarily agree with that. So thank you so much for coming on the show. That is Kent Brown of CCW Safe. I gotta say, I am super excited to be a member now, because not only have I lost no benefits from losing ACLDN, but they offer a lot more services than they did.
So I missed something here, and I didn't go back and cover it. Did ACLDN shut down, and then you started up a new program with CCW Safe, or did ACLDN fold into and become CCW Safe?
Oh, I'm not exactly sure about that exact bit, but essentially all the CCW Safe has acquired all of the members of ACLDN. So I have not paid a cent to CCW Safe. I'm paid up, I think, for a couple of years, actually, because I think I did one of the extended membership ones just to make things easier. But yeah, no, I got a letter in the mail from ACLDN saying that Marty and Gila are retiring, and they've chosen CCW Safe as their successor. And then a little bit later, I got my essentially introductory packet for CCW Safe with my new membership card and all of that. So literally just now I'm a CCW Safe member. I've done nothing.
Okay. Well, that's very convenient for you. And like you said, you not only lose nothing, but you've gotten new benefits.
Correct. Yeah. No, there was a couple of other service providers that did stuff like the hazmat cleanup or would get you a new carry gun if your old carry gun had been confiscated and was wrapped up in the legal procedures, which was not a make it or break it sort of thing. It never got me to consider those other services. But now that it's available to me, yeah, I like that. Oh, and counseling. Mm-hmm. I'm sure others had offered that as well. But like, no, that's a good statement. Like, you end up having, you're in a violent encounter that often it deals with things like PTSD and things like that. So being able to talk to somebody at no expense, no additional expense is also awesome.
I really like that you drilled down on whether or not this covered other acts of self-defense, other weapons, or if it's only guns, because the original, for lack of a better word, concealed carry insurance that I had only covered firearm use, and that was a concern for me. And so when I went shopping for a new one, I found one that covered everything. It isn't CCW safe, but I'm mostly happy with it. I'm not saying the name because a bunch of people are going to roll their eyes and go, ugh, that one. Yeah, it is really important when it comes to these sorts of things to make sure that all acts of self-defense are covered, and that unlike, NRA's Carry Guard, which would basically reimburse you afterward, and only if you were declared innocent, that you get the money first so that you can get that lawyer to make sure that you are acquitted on these charges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, thankfully the NRA Carry Guard has folded, so we could talk as much smack as we can about it, because that was really a terrible product.
Yes, it was. But you know what isn't a terrible product?
What is it, Erin?
The Magnum rounds created by Elmer Keith. Here it is, folks. It's an episode late, but it's about Elmer Keith and the 357 Magnum and all the other Magnums he wrote. He wrote? And all of the other Magnum rounds he invented.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. The topic of this segment was originally requested by Weer'd as special content for episode 357 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. However, at the last minute, literally Sunday afternoon, he decided episode 357 would be a roundtable, and this segment would be pushed back a week. I hope our listeners still enjoy the content, but keep in mind, it's all Weer'd's fault you didn't hear it as part of the appropriate episode. On to the segment. Any of our listeners interested in the history of long-range shooting, cartridge development, or revolvers in general are probably already familiar with the name Elmer Keith. Among many other things, he's the father of a variety of cartridges, including the 357 Magnum in 1935, 44 Magnum in 1955, and the 41 Magnum in 1963. He was also instrumental in the development of the legendary Winchester Model 70 bolt-action rifle. Elmer Keith was born on March 8, 1899, in Missouri. His family moved around quite a bit when he was young, including stays in Montana, Idaho, and Oregon. When he was 12 years old, the rooming house the Keith family was staying in caught fire. While the rest of the family escaped relatively unharmed, Elmer was terribly burned. The doctors at the time didn't expect him to live. It took months before he was even capable of walking, and over a year before he was relatively able. His left hand in particular took several more years before it was more than barely functional. In some ways, he never fully recovered from his burns. Elmer Keith grew up around firearms. His earliest shooting was with muzzleloaders, and in his autobiography, Hell, I Was There, he tells how that stood him in good stead after his father gave him a Hopkins & Allen single-shot 22 rimfire rifle. I highly recommend this book, not just for the story of his life, but the details of a time long past. Elmer was an excellent long-range shot, regularly winning competitions with both handguns and rifles. He was a particular fan of revolvers, his first one being an old .36 caliber Navy Colt he got as a boy. For most of his life, he was, as he put it, almost never out of easy reach of a good six-gun. This included decades working in the saddle as well as hunting game both large and small. For all the rough and tumble environments he both lived and worked in over his life, Elmer never had to use a gun on a person. He credited his awareness of his speed and accuracy with a revolver with helping him avoid getting involved in these situations. During his life, Elmer Keith was always looking to shoot farther and harder. This led him to load various cartridges far beyond the power and pressure levels originally intended. This also resulted in a series of guns with blown-out chambers and shattered cylinders. However, these experiments eventually led to a number of new cartridges, some of which are still with us today. Of all the many designs and advancements Elmer Keith was involved in, probably none are better known than the .357 Magnum cartridge. Around 1930, there was a national concern with what were then called motorized bandits. Groups such as Bonnie Parker, Clyde Barrow, and their Confederates would travel the country committing various crimes in one location before getting back on the road and traveling to the next town, county, or state to continue their lawless ways. They were heavily armed, often wore armored vests, and drove powerful cars, sometimes reinforced with steel plates. To combat this, local and federal law enforcement agents were always on the lookout for weapons and ammunition that would help even the odds. One of the first of these was the .38 Super cartridge introduced by Colt in 1929 for their classic 1911 pistol. It helped, but many people thought more could be done. Major Douglas B. Wesson, then vice president of Smith & Wesson and grandson of founder Daniel B. Wesson, was one of them. He tasked Elmer Keith with developing an even more powerful cartridge. Elmer's initial attempt involved overloading a .38 Special cartridge with a 173 grain bullet of his own design. This was put over a powder charge that pushed it over 1,200 feet per second. When he had it tested by the Peters Cartridge Company, these loads generated over 42,000 pounds of pressure. In comparison, current maximum SAAMI specifications for a .38 Special plus P load is just over 20,000 psi, while modern standard pressure .357 Magnum loads top out around 3,600 pounds of pressure. Elmer blew up a lot of revolvers working out the details of the new cartridge. In Sixguns by Keith, he said he put 1,000 rounds of that overloaded .38 Special through a Smith & Wesson .38-44 heavy-duty revolver to see if he could blow it up. He reported that not only did it handle them perfectly, but at the time of publication, the gun was still in good serviceable condition. If you can find a copy, this is another excellent book for students of firearms history. During development, the concern of firing these super powerful cartridges in guns not suited for them was raised. The solution was to lengthen the case by 1/10 of an inch. This would prevent it from being chambered in older guns, while still allowing the lower-powered .38 Special to be chambered in revolvers designed for the new cartridge. Unfortunately, this overlooked the Colt .38 Long Army revolver, which did not have a step in the chambers, allowing the new cartridge to fit. Sadly, a number of these classic revolvers were destroyed during the public's learning process. The original production .357 Magnum load was finalized in 1935 and featured a 158 grain modified Keith-style bullet over 15.3 grains of 2400 powder. This resulted in velocities of over 1,500 feet per second from an 8 3/8 inch barrel. Current factory loads are often tamer than this out of consideration for older guns. First chambered by Smith & Wesson in the N-frame registered Magnum revolver, which in 1957 was renamed the Model 27, the .357 Magnum can now be found in pistols of all sizes, primarily revolvers, but also in a few semi-automatic handguns. The .357 Magnum was not the end of Elmer Keith's pursuit of more power and velocity. The .44 and .41 Magnums followed, as did several rifle rounds, including what would eventually become the .338 Winchester Magnum, .340 Weatherby Magnum, and .338-378 Weatherby Magnum cartridges. In the mid-1930s, Elmer Keith spent a year and a half along with Don Martin, Sink Thompson, Colonel J. Williams, and Oscar Waterrood designing what they considered to be the optimum long-range hunting rifle. We know it today as the Winchester Model 70. I could continue listing Elmer Keith's accomplishments, designs, and firearms improvements, but I think everyone gets the idea. Hopefully, our listeners can appreciate what he accomplished and how many of our current designs, both firearm and cartridge, are based on his efforts. Elmer Keith died on February 14th, 1984 at the age of 84, only a few weeks shy of his 85th birthday. His contributions to the firearms and shooting communities cannot be overstated. His memory is a blessing.
If you don't know who Elmer Keith is, you need to go over to Google Elmer Keith, and find out who he is.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments, or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Erin or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena Bock and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So first up, David actually found at Midway USA a Lyman 2-cavity bullet mold, and I believe that's a Keith-style bullet that is set up for 38 Special at 357 mag, and it is specifically 358 in diameter. He says that's a saving grace for you. So, in fact, for lead cast rounds, you in fact do want to have them be 358, so you get good contact. And this all got started with you, obviously, Erin. You mentioned to me when we were doing episode 356. Said, "Oh, definitely next week needs to be the 357 Magnum episode." And I'm like, "Okay." And of course,
I mean, it's only because you're one of the biggest revolver nerds I know.
It's true. But you also know Ryan Machad. He's a pretty big revolver nerd too.
Yeah, but I'm not on his podcast except very occasionally as a guest.
Yes. But yeah, no, this is but it started off with you going like, so how did 357 Magnum come about? And interesting enough, it was Smith & Wesson commissioned it. I actually didn't know that until today, but it actually makes a ton of sense since Colt was getting massive amounts of popularity, especially with law enforcement during the whole Depression era gangster things, selling 1911s and 38 Super, and so 357 Magnum was like 38 Super, but way more powerful. And then on top of that, 38 Super is literally just 38 auto plus P. So if you have, like, say, a old Colt 1900, you can, in fact, chamber 38 Super in it, and that would be a bad thing.
Mm. The thing that occurred to me when I was listening to David's segment was that Mr. Keith was the original Bubba of Bubba's Pissin' Hot Handloads.
Absolutely was.
And David was talking about, all the guns whose frames he cracked and cylinders he blew out. And it's just, yep. I mean, did he die with all of his fingers? I think he did, but I'd like to know for sure.
Yeah, he did die with all of his fingers, and it was hard to tell what was going on because, again, he had some pretty severe facial scars from the fire incident that David was talking about. So it's tough to say if at any point he acquired what was often deemed by early IDPA and IPSC shooters of superface, where a gun blows up in your face. Specifically, it was done for 38 people tuning 38 super guns to the absolute limit, and that sometimes is bad. But he did have all of his fingers, as far as I know, and couldn't tell, but very possibly all the scarring on his body was related to the fire.
I mean, that's certainly the impression I got. And so what I'm getting at is, for a man who hot-loaded all these rounds to the destruction of however many pistols, the fact that he didn't suffer injury from that, I mean, he might have gotten hurt but not injured, that's remarkable.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And let's see. Yeah, there's a I just found a picture of a fairly old Elmer Keith, and can't quite see all the fingers on there, but sure looks like most of them are there.
Sure does.
And you can see that his left hand is pretty darn jacked up. So, yeah, he was an absolute impressive figure.
Yeah. As David said, his memory is a blessing.
It is. And may I say, Hell, I Was There is hands down the best autobiography title in the history of ever. Like, no one will ever come up with a better title than that.
Yeah, I sure can't think of anything better.
But maybe not better, but you know what else is awesome, Erin?
Our listeners.
Our listeners. You guys are awesome. You guys really are. I mean it. I'm not joking. Not trying to butter you up. It's just you're good people because you listen to good podcasts. Not to toot my own horn. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Assorted Calibers podcast. But I would be remiss not to give some very special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. To be a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like our hilarious blooper reels, the ACB film tracks, and the ACB Magnum.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I've got a blog, which is weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can find more from me at linktree/Erin Paulette. That's linkter.ee/Erin Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
So last week, when I uploaded the tracks of the episode, there was the one for myself, and then there was the one for everyone else, and that everyone else was titled, You Owe Elmer Keith an Apology. So, Weird owes him an apology, and I don't, because it was my idea to begin with. Our responsibility to Mr. Keith is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Elmer Keith, I beg your forgiveness, and a good night to everybody.